The smell of freshly ground coffee beans and warm pastries hung thick in the air, wrapping around the crowded café, like an invitation Maya Johnson could barely accept. At 27 years old, Maya stood in the middle of the line, one hand clutching her faded leather purse, while the other nervously counted the crumpled bills in her wallet. $3.47. That was barely enough for a small black coffee, nothing more. Her dark brown skin glowed faintly beneath the cafe's soft lights, though exhaustion dulled the brightness in her warm, almond-shaped eyes. She adjusted the loose curls that had escaped her low ponytail, trying to look composed, even though her worn navy blazer had lost its shape months ago. Today mattered. She had a job interview at a small accounting firm downtown in just over an hour. It wasn't glamorous, but if she landed it, maybe, just maybe, she could finally afford her rent without choosing between groceries and paying the electricity bill. She glanced at her watch and exhaled slowly, willing her pounding heart to calm. That's when she heard it, a low, familiar laugh carried across the crowded cafe. Her stomach dropped like a stone. No, it can't be. Maya turned her head slightly, pretending to study the menu board overhead, but her eyes searched the tables by the windows. And there he was. Jerome Harris, 32. Black, tall, broad-shouldered, sharply dressed in a charcoal gray suit that screamed money and power. His perfectly cut fade-polished loafers and gold wristwatch glinted under the warm cafe lights, the picture of controlled confidence. Her ex-boyfriend. Her nightmare. It had been 8 months since she'd left him, disappearing in the middle of the night with nothing but her grandmother's wedding ring and a duffel bag of clothes. 8 months of starting over, of healing, of trying to forget the bruises she once hid beneath layers of makeup. She hadn't expected to see him here. Not today. Not ever. Maya's chest tightened as she inched forward in line, trapped by the crowd at her back and the counter ahead. Her fingers dug into her purse strap, knuckles white as memories came rushing back uninvited. Jerome's hands gripping her throat during their last fight, his whispered apologies afterwards, the shame of dropping the police report because he'd convinced her she was ruining his life. A soft buzz filled her ears as panic clawed up her throat. Jerome hadn't seen her yet, but he would. The cafe was too small. There was nowhere to hide. She scanned the room for an exit, but both doors were on the far side of the shop, too close to where he sat, sipping his latte, like he didn't have a care in the world. Her palms dampened, and her breathing turned shallow, coming in uneven bursts she struggled to control. Stay calm, Maya. Don't fall apart here. Not today. She took another half step forward, her vision tunneling when movement behind her drew her attention. A man stood directly behind her, in line, tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled the space. Although she didn't know his name yet, Ethan Cole was 33 years old, white with clean-cut sandy blonde hair and piercing blue eyes that carried quiet focus. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit and an expensive silver watch, but his posture was relaxed, his expression calm, an island of steadiness in her rising storm. Desperation drowned hesitation. Before realizing what she was doing, Maya spun and stepped toward him, closing the space between them. Her fingers curled into his suit jacket as she pressed her face against his chest, clinging to him like a lifeline. "Please," she whispered so softly, she wasn't sure he heard her. "Please, pretend you know me." Ethan stiffened, instinctively caught off guard, but he didn't pull away. His blue eyes searched her face briefly, catching the silent terror there, and something shifted behind his gaze. He lowered his voice deep and steady. "Hey, there you are," he said gently, playing along without missing a beat. "When would you get here?" Maya almost collapsed with relief. She clung to him as Jerome's chair scraped loudly against the floor behind her, his footsteps approaching. Every muscle in her body went rigid as the familiar scent of Jerome's cologne hit her like a warning. Maya Jerome's smooth baritone voice curled around her name, like silk dipped in poison. "That you?" Ethan felt her tense and immediately slid his arm around her shoulders, keeping her tucked safely against his side. His voice carried a cool authority when he spoke calm but firm. "Is there a problem here?" Ethan asked, tilting his head just slightly toward Jerome without releasing Maya. Jerome paused, his confident mask slipping for a fraction of a second as his dark eyes narrowed. He looked Ethan over, taking in the expensive suit, the protective stance, the quiet strength. "Nah," Jerome said finally, his tone strained. "Just thought I recognized someone I used to know." "You're mistaken," Ethan replied evenly. There was a long beat of silence, a battle fought without words. Then Jerome scoffed softly, adjusting his cufflinks with exaggerated indifference. "Must have been," he muttered before turning on his heel and walking out the cafe door. The sound of it closing behind him was the first breath Maya had been able to take in what felt like forever. Her knees nearly buckled, but Ethan steadied her with a light hand on her back. "You're okay," he murmured, his voice gentler now, carrying no expectation or judgment. "He's gone." For the first time in months, Maya felt safe. As she finally stepped out of Ethan's arms, her cheeks burned with embarrassment and gratitude. "I'm sorry," she stammered, tucking a loose curl behind her ear. "I don't know why I did that. Ethan said softly. You don't have to explain, his blue eyes steady on hers. "I could tell you needed help." He offered her the smallest reassuring smile, the kind of smile that didn't demand anything in return. At that moment, Maya didn't know his name, wealth, or history, but she knew one thing: she trusted him instinctively more than she'd trusted anyone in years, and for reasons she couldn't explain, that terrified her almost as much as seeing Jerome. Maya didn't remember leaving the cafe, only the icy wind slapping against her face as she stepped onto the bustling Chicago sidewalk. Her body still trembled, her pulse thundering in her ears, as if Jerome were right behind her. She clutched her purse tightly and forced herself to breathe, focusing on the rhythmic sound of passing traffic until her heartbeat slowed. The city's noise grounded her: car horns, distant sirens, people chattering as they rushed by, all reminders that she was here in the present and safe. For now. The thought made her stomach twist. Jerome's sudden appearance wasn't a coincidence. He wasn't the kind of man to let go of control so easily. If he had found her in this neighborhood, what else did he know? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her. She glanced at the cracked screen. Grandma Dorothy. "Baby girl." Dorothy's warm but no-nonsense voice filled her ear when she answered. "I just had a feeling I needed to check on you. You okay?" Maya hesitated, staring at her reflection in a nearby shop window. Her curls were frizzing from the wind, and her blazer sat crooked on her shoulders. She looked frazzled, exactly how she felt inside. Yeah," she lied softly. "I'm fine." "Maya, Denise Johnson," Dorothy said firmly, using her full name as she had when Maya was a child. "I know that voice. You are not fine." Maya closed her eyes, leaning against the cold brick wall for support. "I saw Jerome," she admitted finally, her voice breaking on his name. Silence was on the other end, followed by a slow, measured breath. "You keep your head high. You hear me?" Dorothy said, her tone sharp now, protective. "That man might have scared you once, but he doesn't own a piece of you. Don't let him think otherwise." "I know," Maya whispered, though her shaking hands betrayed her. "You come by the apartment tonight," Dorothy continued. "We'll have some tea and talk it out. And Maya, don't you start carrying this by yourself again. You hear me? A lump formed in Maya's throat, but she managed to breathe out, I hear you. By the time Maya ended the call, her hands had steadied, but her thoughts hadn't. She still had her interview in less than an hour, and the weight of that reality sank back in. She glanced at the cafe behind her, wondering if Ethan, the stranger who had shielded her, was still inside. She didn't know why she cared. Because he helped you, a quiet voice inside her answered. Because for those few seconds you didn't feel alone. Shaking off the thought, she started toward the subway station. She didn't see Ethan again that morning. The interview was a disaster. Maya had spent most of it replaying the scene at the cafe in her mind. Jerome's sudden presence, rattling her composure. Her answers came out halting, her voice uneven, and she knew from the interviewer's polite but strained smile that her chances were gone. Her body sagged with exhaustion when she returned to her tiny studio apartment that evening. She kicked off her scuffed flats, dropped her purse on the couch, and pulled out the single thing that always calmed her, the small framed photo of her and Dorothy on her college graduation day. You didn't raise me to quit, Grandma, she whispered to the picture, brushing a thumb over the glass. I'll figure this out. She didn't expect her phone to ring again. Hi, an unfamiliar male voice said, smooth and steady, when she answered. This is Ethan, from the cafe this morning. Maya froze, her heart lurching. She sat up straighter, gripping the phone tightly. How did you get my number? You filled out a loyalty card, he explained gently. I asked the barista for it. I hope that's okay. Her first instinct was to be wary. She'd learned caution the hard way, but his voice carried no threat, only quiet concern. I just wanted to make sure you're all right, Ethan continued after a pause. You seemed shaken up. I'm fine, she said automatically, then winced at how unconvincing she sounded. You don't have to be, he said softly, and something about the kindness in his tone made her throat tighten. There was silence for a beat before he added, If you're comfortable, I'd like to buy you a cup of coffee. No strings. I promise, just conversation. Maya hesitated, Dorothy's warning ringing in her ears. Trust no man who moves too fast. But another voice whispered louder, the part of her that remembered how Ethan had stepped in without hesitation, without asking anything in return. Finally, she said quietly, Just coffee. Just coffee, Ethan confirmed. There's a little place on West Huron. Tomorrow at noon, she agreed before she could overthink it. The next day, Maya arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early, clutching a worn folder of resumes she didn't expect to hand out. She sat at a corner table near the window, pulling her cardigan tighter around herself and tapping her foot nervously against the floor. Ethan arrived precisely at noon, holding 2 coffees, one plain black, one caramel latte with oat milk. He set the latter in front of her without a word, his blue eyes warm as he slid into the seat opposite hers. I guessed, he said, nodding at the latte. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, despite herself. Lucky guess. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the hum of the cafe surrounding them. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice was low and measured. He began, I'm not going to pry, but I want you to know something. You didn't imagine what you felt yesterday. That man, whoever he was, you looked terrified. And you don't deserve to feel unsafe like that. Ever. Maya stared at her cup, tracing a finger along the cardboard sleeve. His words were simple, but they carried weight like someone anchoring her to solid ground. You don't even know me, she murmured. Ethan leaned back slightly, regarding her thoughtfully. Maybe not, but I'd like to. She hesitated, watching him closely for the manipulation she'd learned to recognize so well, the subtle hooks, the controlling undertones Jerome had perfected. But there was none of that here. Ethan's gaze was steady, open, patient. For the first time in a long time, Maya felt seen. As they talked, she found herself telling him small things about her bookkeeping work, Dorothy's obsession with old mystery novels, and how she dreamed of becoming a CPA before everything with Jerome derailed her plans. Ethan listened intently, asking gentle questions, never pushing too far. By the time they finished their coffees, an hour had passed without her noticing. Outside, as they walked toward the street, Ethan stopped and handed her a sleek white business card, embossed with his name and number. "If you ever need anything," he said quietly, "call me, even if it's just to talk." Maya hesitated, then slipped the card into her purse. "Thank you." He smiled, small but genuine, and for a fleeting moment, warmth unfurled in her chest. Soft, tentative, unfamiliar. As Ethan turned to leave, she caught herself watching him go. Her thoughts tangled between gratitude and caution, because for the first time in years, Maya wasn't sure which scared her more. Jerome showing up again, or letting someone like Ethan get close enough to matter. Maya woke the next morning to the soft hum of traffic outside her window. Her studio apartment washed in the pale gray light of a Chicago winter morning. She stared at the ceiling for a long moment, replaying her conversation with Ethan from the day before. Just coffee, she had told herself. That was all it had been. But the memory of their conversation, his calm presence, the way he'd listened without judgment, clung to her like warmth that hadn't faded overnight. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A notification. Another rejection email. She sighed and rolled onto her side, scanning the polite but impersonal words. "We've chosen to move forward with another candidate." It was the third one this week. Maya tossed the phone aside and sat up, rubbing her hands over her face. Her savings were dwindling. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and her grandmother's medication costs were piling up faster than she could manage. The part-time bookkeeping job at a small tax prep service wasn't enough to keep her afloat, but it was all she'd been able to get since leaving Jerome, along with the shadow he'd left behind. Her phone buzzed again, this time a text. Ethan Cole. "Good morning, Maya. I hope you got some rest last night. I want to discuss something with you. No pressure, but would you be free for lunch today?" Maya blinked at the message, hesitating before typing back. Maya, lunch. Ethan, just lunch. I promise. She read the words twice, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Dorothy's voice echoed, "Trust. No man who moves too fast." And yet she remembered the way Ethan had shielded her in the café. He hadn't asked for anything. He hadn't pried. He'd helped and left the choice of seeing him again entirely hers. After a deep breath, she typed her reply. Maya. Okay. The restaurant Ethan chose was small and quiet, tucked on a side street near the river. He was already there when she arrived, seated at a corner table with 2 glasses of water. He stood when she approached, offering a polite smile. He said, "I hope this place works," gesturing for her to sit. "I figured somewhere low-key might be better." "Perfect," she said softly, settling into her chair. The waiter brought menus, but Ethan didn't open his. Instead, he watched her with the same steady patience she'd noticed before, like he had all the time in the world to listen. "I wanted to thank you," she said after a moment, surprising herself. "For yesterday. For helping me." "You don't need to thank me," Ethan replied gently. Anyone would have done the same. Maya gave him a look that said she didn't believe that for a second. "Okay," he admitted, lips curving slightly. "Maybe not everyone, but I'm glad I was there." For a while they talked about safe topics, the freezing weather, the chaos of downtown traffic, the overpriced coffee in the city. But eventually Ethan leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "Maya, I wanted to ask, what kind of work are you looking for?" She hesitated, fingers tracing the edge of her napkin. Anything stable? I used to do bookkeeping and payroll for small businesses, but with everything that happened last year, I had to start over. Ethan studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable, then reached into his jacket pocket and slid a sleek business card across the table. Maya, I run a company, he said. Cole Industries. I'm seeking someone to manage specific parts of my finances and scheduling. It's not a glamorous position, but it pays well, and you'd have full benefits. Maya blinked, stunned. She glanced down at the card, then back up at him. Wait, what? You're offering me a job? I'm offering you an opportunity. Ethan clarified, his tone careful. There's no pressure. And if you'd rather keep looking, I understand completely. She stared at him. Heart pounding, Dorothy's words ringing louder now. Don't let pride starve you. Still hesitation rooted her in place. Why me? She asked quietly. You barely know me. Ethan leaned back, his expression softening. Because yesterday I saw someone who stays composed under pressure even when she's terrified. Someone resourceful. Someone I instinctively trusted. And I don't say that lightly. Maya swallowed hard, caught between gratitude and doubt. She couldn't shake the gnawing fear that this was charity pity dressed up as kindness. I don't want you to feel obligated to help me just because of what happened at the café, she said finally. This isn't about yesterday, Ethan replied firmly, his voice steady but gentle. I need someone I can trust, and something tells me you're exactly that. That night, she sat at Dorothy's kitchen table, the business card lying between them like a fragile secret. The small apartment smelled faintly of peppermint tea, and the old radiator hissed in the corner. Dorothy picked up the card, squinting at the embossed letters. Cole Industries, she read aloud. Sounds fancy. It is, Maya admitted. I looked it up. It's huge. Dorothy's sharp brown eyes met hers over the rim of her glasses. And this Ethan happens to want to hire you. He says he needs someone he can trust, Maya murmured. And I don't know, Grandma. Part of me thinks it's crazy, but another part of me, I want to believe him. Dorothy set the card down gently and reached for Maya's hand. Listen to me, baby girl. If you take this job, you keep your eyes open and your boundaries firm. But don't you let fear hold you back from a blessing when it knocks on your door. Maya's throat tightened as she nodded. 2 days later, Maya stood in the gleaming marble lobby of Cole Industries, clutching her worn leather purse as she waited for the elevator. She didn't know where this path would lead, but for the first time in months, hope felt less like a distant dream and more like a cautious step forward. Somewhere above her, Ethan Cole was waiting, and though she didn't realize it yet, taking this job would change everything. The glass doors of Cole Industries towered above Maya, like a gateway to another world. She stood in the bustling marble lobby, clutching her worn leather purse, as people moved briskly around her, their sharp suits and purposeful strides radiating confidence. She swallowed hard, adjusting the strap on her blazer, determined not to let her nerves show. This was it, her first day. The elevator chimed softly, opening to reveal the 40th floor, the executive level. She stepped out into a reception area, bathed in natural light, from floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. A soft hum of activity filled the space, but the design was warm and inviting, not cold or intimidating as she'd feared. Hi, you must be Maya. Maya turned to find a smiling woman approaching her. She was petite, stylish, and easily carried herself, instantly making the place feel less overwhelming. I'm Nicole Carter, she said, extending a hand. Executive coordinator and unofficial tour guide. Come on, I'll show you around before Ethan leaves his morning meeting. Relieved to find a friendly face, Maya followed Nicole down a hallway with framed photographs of company milestones and community events. Nicole grinned as she walked. "You should know Ethan's been unusually excited since hiring you. He came in 2 hours early today to make sure everything was ready." Maya blinked, startled. "For me? For his new assistant?" Nicole teased lightly. "You've got a corner office, by the way. It was his idea. You deserve the space to do it right if you manage his schedule and finances." Maya opened her mouth to protest, but Nicole waved a hand before she could. "Don't bother arguing," she said with a laugh. "Once Ethan decides on something, his mind is not changed. Best to say thank you." When Nicole opened the door to her new office, Maya froze in the doorway. The room was bright and spacious, with a sleek modern desk near a large window overlooking the city. A vase of fresh white lilies sat on the corner, their soft fragrance filling the air, and a small card leaned against it. "Welcome to the team." Maya's chest tightened unexpectedly, her throat thickening with unspoken emotion. "It's beautiful," she murmured, running her fingertips along the desk's smooth surface. Nicole smiled knowingly. "He likes his people to feel valued. You'll get used to it." An hour later, Ethan walked into her office, freshly out of a meeting. His navy tie loosened slightly, and sleeves rolled up. "Settling in? Okay?" he asked, his voice calm but warm. "Yes," Maya said, standing automatically. "Thank you for all of this. You didn't have to." "Stop right there," he interrupted gently, his expression soft but firm. "You work here now. You deserve the tools and space to do your job well. No apologies necessary." For a moment, their eyes held something unspoken flickering between them, before Ethan cleared his throat and gestured toward the folders on her desk. "Let's get started," he said, shifting back into business mode. "We'll review my schedule, personal accounts, and current projects. There's a lot to learn, but I have no doubt you can handle it." Over the next few days, Maya discovered Ethan was a demanding boss, but never unfair. He expected precision and thoroughness, but also trusted her judgment, giving her autonomy over tasks most executives guarded closely. Her first major project involved reorganizing his personal financial reports. As she sifted through stacks of records, she noticed Ethan's meticulous attention to detail and priorities. He donated substantial sums to women's shelters, scholarship programs, and community outreach projects. It surprised her. For someone with that much wealth, he didn't flaunt it. He invested it quietly, thoughtfully. When she presented her reorganized reports on Thursday morning, Ethan scanned her work and nodded once, a flicker of genuine appreciation crossing his face. "You're thorough," he said. "I like that." The words shouldn't have mattered so much, but they did. By the second week, Maya had begun to find her rhythm. She arrived early, kept Ethan's calendar running smoothly, and even started contributing ideas during staff meetings, something she hadn't had the confidence to do in years. One afternoon, Nicole appeared at her office door holding a stack of forms. "Clothing allowance," she said, with a grin, setting the papers on Maya's desk. Maya frowned, confused. "Clothing allowance, company policy." Nicole explained, "Annual stipend for professional wardrobe expenses. Ethan insisted you take advantage of it this week." Maya hesitated, guilt gnawing at her. She opened her mouth to protest, but Nicole raised an eyebrow. "Don't even start," she warned lightly. "Everyone gets it, Maya. It's not charity. Trust me, Ethan would want you to look as professional as you are." Maya exhaled slowly, forcing herself to nod. "All right, I'll use it." That evening, Maya stopped by Dorothy's apartment after work, carrying a small bag of groceries. Her grandmother sat at the kitchen table knitting a bright red scarf as the news murmured in the background. "You look tired," Dorothy observed, glancing up over her glasses, "but happy." Maya smiled faintly as she unpacked the groceries. It's a lot to take in. Everyone's been so welcoming. And Ethan? She paused, unsure how much to say. Dorothy set her knitting aside, fixing her with that sharp, knowing gaze Maya had grown up under. Is that man paying you fairly? Yes, Grandma Maya said, suppressing a laugh. Better than fairly? Dorothy nodded approvingly. Good. You earn every penny. Don't let him or anyone else make you feel otherwise. Maya hesitated, chewing her lip. He's different, Grandma. He actually listens. He cares about his people. It doesn't feel like a boss and employee thing. It feels personal. Dorothy supplied, raising an eyebrow. Maya flushed, shaking her head quickly. No, it's not like that. Dorothy hummed, unconvinced. Just keep your heart steady, baby girl. You've had enough storms for one lifetime. But even as Maya assured herself Dorothy was overthinking it, she couldn't ignore the small, quiet gestures Ethan made daily. The way her morning coffee appeared exactly how she liked it. The thoughtful notes he left when he had late meetings. The way he always asked about Dorothy's health. It was professional. Mostly. Late one night, Maya was finishing Ethan's schedule when her phone buzzed. A single unknown number flashed across the screen before vanishing. She stared at it, her chest tightening. A cold whisper crept up her spine. She didn't need to see a name to know who it was. Jerome hadn't gone away. The phone number disappeared from the screen as quickly as it had appeared, but Maya sat frozen at her desk, staring at the darkened display like it might flash again. She swallowed hard, forcing her thoughts to slow down to be rational. It could have been anyone. A wrong number. A telemarketer. Nothing to panic over. Except deep down, she already knew. Jerome. 8 months hadn't erased the sound of his voice the way it could wrap around her name like a warning. The cafe encounter should have been a coincidence, but this was different. He was reaching out now. She shoved the phone into her purse, determined not to spiral. Not here. Not at work. By the next morning, Maya had convinced herself she was overreacting. Until Nicole stopped by her office, mid-morning, her brow furrowed. Hey, Nicole, whispered, leaning against the doorframe. Weird question, but do you know a guy in a gray hoodie? Tall, maybe late 30s. I saw him downstairs in the lobby just now. He was standing near the security desk, looking around like he was waiting for someone. Maya froze. Why? Nicole shrugged casually, but her tone carried a hint of unease. When I walked by, he asked the receptionist if I still worked there. The words hit like ice water. Maya tried to play it off, forcing her voice to steady a client from my old job. I'll handle it. Nicole gave her a long, skeptical look, but nodded slowly. If you say so. Just be careful, okay? That night, Maya stopped at Dorothy's apartment on her way home. The familiar scent of lavender and peppermint tea instantly grounded her, easing some of the tension in her chest. Dorothy was seated in her favorite armchair, knitting needles, clicking steadily, but she looked up sharply when she saw Maya's face. What happened? Nothing, Maya said automatically, setting her bag on the table. Dorothy set her knitting aside deliberately and leaned forward, resting her forearms on her knees. Try again. Maya hesitated, staring down at her hands. Finally, she exhaled and whispered, I think Jerome found me. The room fell silent, except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. Dorothy's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing with fear and fury. That boy, she muttered under her breath. Didn't I tell you to file for that restraining order when you had the chance? Maya admitted I didn't think I needed it. Her voice small. I thought if I stayed quiet and disappeared, he'd move on. Dorothy reached across the table and took Maya's hands in her own. Baby girl, you don't have to fight this alone anymore. Not this time. You've got me. And maybe she paused deliberately. You've got someone else now, too. Maya blinked, startled. Grandma. I'm not blind, Dorothy interrupted gently. I see the way that Ethan man looks at you, and the way you're starting to breathe easier with him around. It may be time to let somebody help you carry this weight. Maya shook her head quickly. This isn't his problem. I don't want to drag him into Maya. Denise, Dorothy said, her voice suddenly sharp. If a man cares for you, you don't get to decide what his problem is and what isn't. That's not how trust works. The words stuck with her long after she left Dorothy's apartment. 2 days later, Maya arrived at work early, determined to push past the fear and focus on her responsibilities. She buried herself in scheduling meetings and managing Ethan's finances until the nervous edge in her chest faded. By mid-afternoon, she was deep in a spreadsheet when Ethan appeared in her doorway, leaning against the frame with his hands in his pockets. You've been at this for hours, he said quietly. Come up for air. She smiled faintly. I want to ensure the donation records are perfect before tomorrow's board review. They're perfect, Ethan said without hesitation, his blue eyes steady on hers. I checked. You've been doing incredible work, Maya. The compliment warmed her, but her expression faltered before she could stop it. Ethan caught the shift immediately, his gaze sharpening. What is it? Nothing, she said too quickly, looking back at her screen. Ethan stepped into the office, his voice lower now, deliberate. Maya. She hesitated, chewing the inside of her cheek before finally meeting his eyes. I think Jerome's been trying to contact me. Ethan went still, the air in the room shifting. What happened? She explained everything. The call, the man in the lobby, the creeping certainty Jerome was nearby. She expected him to lecture her, to demand why she hadn't said anything sooner, but he didn't. Instead, Ethan crossed his arms, considering his words carefully. You should have told me right away, he said, finally, his tone calm but resolute. Not because I want to control how you handle this, but because your safety matters here, you matter here. I didn't want to make it your problem, she admitted quietly. It became my problem the second that man showed up at this building, Ethan said firmly. From now on, you don't walk into this office without security knowing precisely who you are and who isn't allowed near you. Maya swallowed hard, nodding. Ethan added that I'll also have to handle this legally, his voice steady. We can file for a restraining order. And if Jerome sets foot near you again, we'll involve the police immediately. The authority in his tone should have felt overbearing, but it didn't. It felt protective, steady, safe. Her chest loosened just enough for her to breathe for the first time in days. That night, as she walked home from the train station, Maya couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. Every time her heels clicked against the cracked pavement, the faint echo behind her made her quicken her pace. She glanced over her shoulder. Heart pounding, nothing, just shadows stretching long under the flickering streetlights. Still, when she reached her building, she double-locked the door and pressed her back against it, willing her body to calm down. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Another unknown number. This time a text. You can't hide from me forever. Her stomach dropped, the phone trembling in her hand. And suddenly, she knew two things for sure. Jerome hadn't moved on. And this wasn't over. The text sat on Maya's phone screen like a threat carved into glass. You can't hide from me forever. She stared at it for a long moment, her hands trembling slightly, before she forced herself to set the phone down on the counter. Her chest rose and fell in sharp, shallow breaths as memories she'd tried to bury clawed their way back. For several seconds, she stood frozen in the quiet of her apartment. Every sound from outside, passing footsteps, distant sirens, sharpening her nerves. Finally she moved, locking the windows, drawing the blinds, and double-checking the door chain. When her breathing steadied enough to think clearly, she picked up her phone again and scrolled through her contacts. Her finger hovered over Ethan's name, hesitating, debating. Dorothy's voice echoed in her mind. If a man cares for you, you don't get to decide what his problem is and what isn't. She hit call. Ethan answered on the second ring. Maya. His voice was alert, calm, but threaded with quiet concern. I got a text, she said softly, forcing the words out from Jerome. He knows where I live. There was silence for half a beat. Then Ethan's voice deepened, even and steady. Stay inside. Lock everything. I'm coming over. You don't have to. I'm already on my way, he said firmly, leaving no room for argument. 20 minutes later, a knock sounded at her door. Maya hesitated, checking through the peephole before unlocking it. Ethan stood there, dressed simply in dark jeans and a gray coat, his usual composed expression carrying an undercurrent of determination she hadn't seen before. Show me the message, he said quietly as he stepped inside. She handed him the phone, watching his jaw tighten as he read it. His gaze lifted to meet hers, steady and resolute. I've already contacted Coal Industries' security team, he said. Starting tomorrow, they'll have someone stationed at the lobby entrance and near your office. I'll also arrange for someone to walk you home until we figure this out. Maya's throat tightened. I don't want to cause trouble. You're not causing trouble, Ethan interrupted softly but firmly. You deserve to feel safe, Maya. You will be safe. Something in his tone, calm, unshakable, rooted her panic and gave her the smallest sense of stability. The following week brought change. Coal Industries' security team quietly implemented additional measures around the office. Maya now had a coded badge and an assigned escort to and from the building, and the receptionist at the front desk kept a photo of Jerome tucked discreetly beside her keyboard. Ethan handled everything behind the scenes, never pushing her to talk before she was ready, but always ensuring she knew she wasn't alone. In the middle of all this, Maya poured herself into her work. She reorganized several of Ethan's personal accounts, corrected inconsistencies in the quarterly donation records, and even designed a streamlined system for tracking philanthropic initiatives. During one afternoon meeting, Ethan glanced at the color-coded report she'd prepared and nodded approvingly. He said, "This is precisely what I needed," his blue eyes softening. "You're exceeding every expectation I had." The praise warmed her, but more than that, it gave her a quiet sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Dorothy noticed the shift in her immediately. One evening, as they sat at the small kitchen table in Dorothy's apartment, Maya reviewed expense spreadsheets while her grandmother sipped tea. "You're glowing," Dorothy said, setting her mug down and narrowing her eyes playfully. Maya looked up, startled. "I am not." Dorothy leaned back, folding her arms. "That job's been good for you. You've got your spark back." "It's not just the job," Maya admitted before she could stop herself, then hesitated, fiddling with the edge of a paper. Dorothy arched an eyebrow, lips curving into the faintest knowing smile. "Ah, it's also the boss." Grandma Maya groaned, covering her face with her hands. "Don't you grandma me," Dorothy said lightly, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "If someone treats you kindly and respectfully, you don't need to apologize for letting it matter." Maya smiled faintly, shaking her head. "It's not like that." Dorothy hummed, unconvinced, before turning back to her tea. Over the next few weeks, Maya and Ethan settled into a quiet rhythm. Most mornings, Ethan stopped by her office before his first meeting, leaning against the doorframe as she organized his schedule. They'd exchange updates, light banter, and occasionally wander into personal topics. Dorothy's sweet potato pie recipe, Maya's obsession with old mystery novels, Ethan's failed attempts to keep a houseplant alive. Small things, but meaningful ones. One afternoon he appeared at her desk, holding a sleek leather-bound portfolio. A gift, he said, setting it in front of her. Maya blinked, hesitant. "Ethan, I can't accept. It's for work," he said gently. "You're representing me in meetings now. You deserve proper tools." She ran her fingers over the smooth leather, her initials embossed in gold on the corner. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Ethan smiled faintly. "So are the things you've been building here." Silence hung between them for a moment, charged but unspoken, until Nicole's cheerful voice floated from the hallway, breaking the moment. Despite the growing comfort in her new life, the tension in the background never disappeared completely. Jerome's number changed twice over the next month, but the messages kept coming, vague, taunting reminders that he hadn't forgotten her. "You think you're safe because of him? You can't hide behind money forever." Ethan reviewed the messages calmly, forwarding them to legal and security each time. "Every one of these builds a case," he reassured her. "It's only a matter of time before we shut this down for good." And though Maya believed him, part of her knew Jerome wasn't the kind of man to walk away quietly. One Friday evening, after a particularly long week, Ethan stopped by Maya's office as she was packing up. "Hungry?" he asked casually, leaning on the doorframe. Maya hesitated. "Are we talking dinner or business?" "Dinner." Ethan said, his expression soft but unreadable. "No work talk, just a meal." For a moment she almost said no. Keeping boundaries mattered. But then she remembered Dorothy's words, the warmth of Ethan's steady presence, and the quiet exhaustion of carrying everything alone. She nodded slowly. "Okay." Ethan's smile was slight, but genuine, like sunlight breaking through a cloudy day. "Good. There's a place nearby you'll like." That night, they sat in a quiet corner booth of a small Italian restaurant. The warm lighting reflected off the polished wood table, and soft music played in the background. For the first time in a long while, Maya let herself relax. They talked about everything except work. Their favorite books, the best spots for coffee in the city, childhood memories that shaped who they were. And somewhere between shared laughter and candlelight, she realized she wasn't afraid. Not of Jerome, not of trust, not even of the quiet possibility growing between them. The following Monday, the office felt unusually quiet. Most of the team was in back-to-back board meetings, leaving the executive floor hushed, except for the soft hum of the HVAC and the faint clicking of Maya's keyboard. She focused on finalizing a set of financial reports, but her thoughts kept returning to Friday night, to the restaurant's soft lighting, the warmth in Ethan's blue eyes, and the ease of their laughter as hours slipped unnoticed. She had told herself dinner was harmless, professional, but something had shifted. Ethan appeared at her door that afternoon, leaning casually against the frame. "Got a minute?" Maya glanced up, startled, then quickly composed herself. "Of course." He stepped inside, holding a small stack of folders. He said, "I wanted to talk through the logistics for next month's charity gala," setting the papers on her desk. "You'll need to coordinate with the event team, approve the catering menu, and review the final guest list with me." She nodded, flipping open the top folder. "I can handle that." "I know you can." Ethan said, his voice warm, steady. Something in his tone made her pause, but Nicole appeared in the doorway, holding a clipboard before she could respond. "Ethan," she said, grinning, "your 2 o'clock is early." He sighed softly, giving Maya an apologetic look. "Later," he said quietly before leaving with Nicole. Maya watched him go, her chest tightening with emotions she wasn't ready to name. The days that followed blurred into a flurry of preparations for the gala. Maya worked late, juggling schedules, budgets, and donor outreach. Her attention split between details and deadlines. Ethan matched her pace, staying long after the rest of the staff had gone home, offering quiet support when she needed it most. One evening, they were the only two left in the office. The city stretched below them in a wash of twinkling lights, the glass windows reflecting their silhouettes against the skyline. "You should go home," Maya said, glancing up from her laptop. "You've been here since 7 this morning." "So have you," Ethan countered, resting one hand on her chair as he leaned slightly closer. "But unlike you, I don't see you taking breaks." She smirked faintly, refusing to look up from her screen. "Maybe I don't need them." "Maya," he said softly, and something in the way her name left his lips made her finally meet his gaze. The silence between them stretched briefly, weighted with unspoken things neither dared to name. Ethan's expression shifted, his blue eyes warm but steady. "You don't have to carry everything by yourself," he said quietly. "Not here. Not anymore." Her throat tightened, and she looked away quickly, blinking hard against the sudden sting behind her eyes. "I've been doing it for so long," she admitted, her voice low. "I don't know how to stop." "You don't have to figure it out alone," he said. The weight of his words settled over her, like a promise she hadn't realized she'd been waiting for. A few days later, the gala arrived. The venue was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers glittered above the ballroom, elegantly dressed guests mingled over champagne, and soft music drifted from the live quartet. Maya stood near the entrance, adjusting the small earpiece connected to the event team, while monitoring last-minute preparations. "You look incredible," Nicole whispered beside her, giving her a playful nudge. Maya glanced down at her deep emerald gown, rented through the company's wardrobe allowance, and shook her head. "I'm going to trip over the hem any second." "Relax," Nicole teased. "You're turning heads for all the right reasons." Before Maya could respond, Ethan appeared across the room, dressed in a classic black tuxedo that fit him like it had been made for him. Their eyes met, and for a brief, breathless moment, the crowd's noise faded away. He crossed the room slowly, offering a small private smile meant only for her. "You clean up well," he said softly when he reached her. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "You're not so bad yourself." Throughout the evening, Ethan introduced Maya to board members, donors, and other influential guests, always including her in conversations instead of treating her like an assistant. Each time he positioned her by his side, subtly but deliberately, until it became impossible to ignore the shift in their dynamic. Maya slipped out onto the balcony for a quiet moment as the night wore on. The city stretched endlessly before her, lights glittering like stars against the velvet dark sky. She leaned against the railing, breathing in the cool night air, when the footsteps behind her made her turn. Ethan stepped onto the balcony, hands tucked into his pockets. "Hiding, just taking a moment," she said softly. He moved to stand beside her, his shoulder brushing lightly against hers as they gazed out over the skyline. "You've done an incredible job tonight," he said after a pause. "None of this would have come together without you." Maya looked up at him, catching the sincerity in his expression, and her chest tightened. "Thank you," she murmured. Ethan hesitated, then added, "You deserve to be seen for the value you bring, not just here, but everywhere." The words struck deeper than she expected. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The city lights flickered below the soft hum of distant music floating through the open doors behind them. Finally, Maya turned to face him fully, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why me, Ethan?" He met her gaze without hesitation, his expression steady. "Because you're strong," he said quietly. "Because you don't see how remarkable you are yet. But I do." Her breath caught, and she opened her mouth to reply, but the sound of shattering glass inside the ballroom broke the moment, snapping them back into reality. By the time the gala ended, exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders, but something else lingered beneath it, an awareness she couldn't ignore anymore. Something had shifted between them, subtle but undeniable. And yet as she walked to her car that night, another shadow lurked at the edge of her thoughts. Jerome. The messages had stopped in recent days, but she knew better than to believe the silence meant safety. She had a growing bond with Ethan now, but she also had a past that refused to stay buried. And deep down, she sensed those two worlds were on a collision course she couldn't avoid. The morning after this gala, Maya sat at her kitchen table, nursing a cup of tea, staring blankly at the steam curling upward. The night had been a success, donors impressed, funding secured, and Coal Industries earning glowing praise from every attendee. But what lingered wasn't the event itself. It was the balcony. Ethan's quiet words, the intensity in his gaze, the feeling of standing on the edge of something she couldn't name. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. A message from Nicole. Nicole, front page coverage. Also, Ethan asked me to tell you he's proud of you. Don't tell him I told you that. Maya smiled faintly despite herself, then closed her phone and finished her tea. Today was Monday. Back to work, back to normal. At least that was what she told herself. By mid-morning, the office was buzzing with energy, the team swapping stories about the gala and teasing Maya for how effortlessly she'd handled the demanding guests. She smiled and deflected most of their compliments, but she couldn't escape the subtle glances from Nicole Sharp, knowing suspiciously amused. Around noon, Ethan stopped by her office, leaning casually against the doorframe as he often did. "Lunch?" he asked. She blinked up at him. "I brought something from home." "Good," he said, faintly holding up a takeout bag. "You can eat that tomorrow." Before she could protest, Nicole's voice rang out from down the hall. "Go with him, Maya. He bribed me with an espresso, so I wouldn't schedule anything during lunch." Maya gave Nicole a mock glare before standing resigned but secretly grateful. They ended up at a small, quiet café a few blocks away, far removed from the noise of the office. They talked about work for the first few minutes, donor follow-ups, quarterly goals, and expanding scholarship programs. But eventually conversation drifted to safer, softer things. Ethan said, stirring his coffee absently, "I read one of those mystery novels you recommended." Maya's brows shot up in surprise. "You read fiction?" He smirked faintly. "I do read occasionally, contrary to popular belief." "Did you like it?" He admitted, "I stayed up until 2 in the morning finishing it." And Maya laughed, the sound easing the quiet tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. She let herself enjoy the warmth between them for a moment, the ease of sharing space without fear or expectation. But that warmth shattered when her phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. Her stomach clenched as she hesitated before flipping it over, letting the message light up the screen. "Pretty dress last night. Green always was your color." Her blood ran cold. Ethan noticed immediately. "Maya." She swallowed hard, sliding the phone toward him silently. His jaw tightened as he read the message, his usually calm expression darkening. "That's it," he said quietly but firmly. "We're done reacting. It's time to act." "Ethan." "No." He interrupted, his voice steady but unyielding. "This ends now. I'm calling our legal team today. We'll escalate this to the police. And until they handle it, you won't be walking anywhere alone." Maya exhaled shakily, staring down at the table. He was there last night at the gala. Ethan reached across the table, his hand hovering above hers, pausing as if waiting for permission. When she didn't pull away, he rested his hand lightly over hers, firm, grounding, steady. "You're not alone," he said softly, voice low but resolute. "Not anymore." The rest of the day passed in a blur of tense phone calls and quiet precautions. Security at Coal Industries doubled with additional guards stationed in the lobby and parking garage. A detailed incident report was filed, Jerome's previous messages cataloged, and Ethan's personal attorney was contacted directly to expedite a restraining order. Through it all, Ethan stayed close, but never overbearing, letting her choose what steps she was comfortable taking, while ensuring she was protected. That evening, he appeared at her office door while packing up. "Let me drive you home," he said. She hesitated. "Ethan, you don't need to." "I know," he interrupted gently. "I want to." The drive was initially quiet, the city lights casting shifting patterns across the dashboard. Eventually, Maya broke the silence. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. He glanced at her briefly before returning his eyes to the road. "Because no one should have to face this alone," he said. She turned toward him, studying the steady line of his jaw and his expressions calm. "It's more than that." His hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel, but he didn't deny it. "Yes," he said after a long pause. "It is." Her chest tightened her thoughts, a tangled mess of fear, longing, and guilt. She wanted to trust him. She tried to lean into the safety he offered, but trust had burned her before, left scars that still ached in the quiet hours of the night. As if sensing her hesitation, Ethan slowed the car at a red light and turned to face her fully. "Maya," he said softly, his voice careful, patient. "I'm not asking for anything from you. I'm not expecting anything. I want you to know I'm here. Whatever you need, however you need it." The sincerity in his tone unraveled something deep inside her, loosening knots she hadn't realized were still tied. She nodded slowly, unable to form words, but Ethan seemed to understand anyway. Later that night, alone in her apartment, Maya stood by the window staring at the streetlights below. She thought about the messages, the shadows creeping closer, the fear she couldn't quite shake. But she also thought about Ethan's hand over hers, the steadiness in his voice, and the promise he hadn't needed to speak aloud. She felt terrified and hopeful for the first time in months, like she was balancing on a knife's edge between danger and something fragile, tentative, and real. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Another unknown number. "You belong to me, Maya. You always have." Her breath caught her heart hammering in her chest. And suddenly, she knew Ethan had been right all along. It was time to stop running. The next morning began with rain hammering against the glass walls of Coal Industries, streaking the skyline in shades of silver and gray. The storm mirrored the tension twisting in Maya's chest as she sat at her desk, reviewing reports she barely registered. Ethan had doubled security overnight. She now carried an upgraded ID badge, and 2 guards were stationed outside the executive floor. But no amount of precautions erased the words that haunted her. "You belong to me, Maya. You always have." She'd barely slept, jolting awake at every creak of her apartment, every distant car horn. Fear clung to her like a second skin. At 10:15 a.m., Nicole appeared in the doorway, her usual cheerful expression replaced by worry. "Maya," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder before stepping inside. "Security just reported something. There's a man outside the building, pacing. He's been here for half an hour." Maya's chest tightened. "Did they confirm?" Nicole nodded. "It's him." Minutes later, Ethan strode into her office, his expression calm, but his jaw set like stone. "Jerome's downstairs," he said, voice low and controlled. "Security's keeping him on the public sidewalk. He hasn't crossed onto company property yet, but he's watching." Maya's stomach knotted, nausea rolling through her. What does he want? Ethan's gaze softened for the briefest moment before hardening again. It doesn't matter what he wants. He doesn't get to decide where you feel safe. He placed a folder on her desk. The legal team finalized the restraining order this morning. I'll make sure he's served today. She exhaled shakily, gripping the edge of the desk like it was her only anchor. And if he ignores it? Ethan's blue eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. Then he deals with me. The day dragged on tense and uneasy. Though Jerome eventually left, Maya couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. Every time the elevator chimed, every shadow shifting across the floor, her body tensed instinctively. By late afternoon, Ethan appeared again, leaning casually against the doorframe. Though she caught the sharpness in his posture, the constant awareness behind his calm exterior. "Walk with me," he said quietly. She nodded, following him into one of the smaller conference rooms. The glass walls gave them a clear view of the hallway, but inside, the space felt private, contained. "Maya," Ethan began, his voice measured. "I need you to understand something. You're not alone in this. Whatever happens, I'm in it with you." She lowered her gaze, tracing the seam of her notebook with her thumb. "I'm scared, Ethan," she admitted softly. "I thought I'd escaped him. I thought starting over meant I was free." He stepped closer, stopping within reach, but leaving her space to decide the distance. "Starting over doesn't erase the past," he said gently. "But it doesn't define you either." "He doesn't define you." Maya finally looked up, meeting his steady gaze, and for the first time in days, she felt her breathing slow. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked quietly. "You don't have to." "I do." Ethan said simply, "Because I care." The words hung between them, charged and unspoken, until a soft knock on the door broke the moment. Nicole leaned inside, her voice urgent. "Security just called again," she said. Jerome came back, and this time he tried to get into the parking garage. Ethan moved fast. Within minutes, he had the head of security in his office issuing quiet, efficient orders. "Pull footage from every camera," he said sharply. "I want copies sent directly to my desk." "Yes, sir." "And get Chicago PD on the line," Ethan added. "Ensure the restraining order is in their system by the end of the day." Maya stood near the window, her hands clenched tightly together, trying to steady her breathing. When Ethan finally turned back to her, his expression softened again. "You're not going home alone tonight," he said firmly. "I'll drive you. I can't keep letting you—" "You're not letting me," Ethan interrupted gently but firmly. "This isn't about favors, Maya. It's about keeping you safe." She hesitated, then nodded silently. The storm had passed that evening, but the streets were slick and glistening under the city lights as Ethan's car wound through downtown. Neither spoke at first. The silence was filled only by the soft hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of rainwater dripping from rooftops. Finally, Maya broke the quiet. "You don't owe me this." Ethan's grip tightened on the steering wheel, though his tone remained even. "Maybe not. But I want to be here. You don't need to earn that." Her throat tightened at the simplicity of his words. No one had said something like that to her in years. When they reached her building, Ethan insisted on walking her upstairs. The hallway was quiet, the flicker of an overhead light throwing faint shadows along the walls. As they reached her door, Maya paused, glancing up at him. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan met her gaze, his blue eyes steady and unguarded. "Always." For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them shifted heavy with unspoken emotions. Neither dared to name. Then Maya stepped back, unlocking her door. "Good night, Ethan." He hesitated, as if weighing whether to say more, then finally nodded. "Good night, Maya." She thought the night would bring rest, But hours later, she jolted awake to the sound of something outside her window. Her heart thundered as she crept toward the blinds, slowly pulling them aside. Down on the street, a figure stood under the streetlight, unmoving, his face hidden in shadow. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Another unknown number. Did you think you could hide behind him forever? Maya's breath caught. This wasn't just stalking anymore. This was a warning. And she knew then, with icy clarity, that Jerome was preparing to cross a line, one they might not come back from. Maya barely slept. Every sound outside, the creak of pipes, the low rumble of distant traffic, even the faint hum of the refrigerator felt amplified against the silence of her apartment. Her phone sat on the nightstand like a loaded weapon, the last message from Jerome still glowing faintly on the screen. Did you think you could hide behind him forever? She knew Ethan would want her to call. He'd told her no, promised her she wouldn't have to face this alone. But she was so tired of being afraid. By dawn, she decided that today she wouldn't hide. At Cole Industries, Ethan was waiting by her office door before she arrived. He had 2 cups of coffee and that steady, unreadable expression she'd come to rely on when the world felt unraveling. He said quietly that you didn't answer my text last night, handing her the coffee. I know, she murmured, taking it with a slight nod. I didn't want to make it worse. Ethan's jaw tightened. Maya, you're not making anything worse. He is. Before she could respond, Nicole approached, her usual cheer dimmed by worry. Security just confirmed something, she said softly. Jerome was spotted again this morning, across the street, watching. The cup trembled slightly in Maya's hand. Ethan reached out instinctively, steadying it with his. He's escalating, he said, his voice low but certain. And that means we escalate too. By mid-morning, Ethan had pulled her into a private strategy meeting with the company's head of security and his personal attorney. Plans were laid out. The restraining order would be enforced immediately. Cameras around Maya's building would be upgraded, and an off-duty officer would be assigned to shadow her commute for the next few weeks. But Maya noticed something else during the meeting, the way Ethan stayed close, his presence quiet, but grounding, his gaze flicking to her every time tension rose. He was steady in a storm she hadn't asked for. That night, Ethan insisted on driving her home again. Just until things settle, he said when she tried to protest. But as they neared her apartment, Maya noticed something unusual. The street was darker than usual. One overhead lamp flickered, and a black SUV sat idling across from her building. Her pulse kicked hard. Ethan, I see it, he said calmly, pulling to a slow stop. He scanned the mirrors, his posture shifting subtly, protective alert. Stay here. Ethan, wait. But before she could finish, the SUV's headlights flared, and the engine roared to life. Tires screeched as it pulled away, disappearing into the night. Ethan sat there for a moment, silent, watching the taillights vanish. Then he exhaled slowly, his jaw tight. That wasn't random, he said finally. He's testing boundaries. Hours later, Maya sat curled on her couch, a blanket around her shoulders, while Ethan checked the locks on her windows and doors for the 3rd time. You don't have to do this, she whispered. Ethan turned his gaze steady. I want to do this. His tone had no hesitation, no trace of obligation, only certainty. Maya swallowed hard, her voice barely audible. I hate feeling like a burden. You're not, Ethan said softly, sitting across from her. You've been surviving on your own for so long, you've forgotten what it's like to let someone stand with you. But you're not alone anymore, Maya. Not unless you choose to be. Her chest tightened, and her phone buzzed violently against the coffee table before she could find the right words. Another unknown number. Ethan grabbed it before she could unlock the screen. I see you. For the first time, Ethan's calm cracked. That's it, he said sharply, standing. Pack a bag. You're staying at my place tonight. Ethan's penthouse was nothing like Maya expected. It wasn't sterile or cold, but warm with soft lighting shelves filled with books and the faint scent of cedar in the air. Guest rooms down the hall, he said quietly, setting her bag on the bed. I'll be in the next room if you need anything. But later that night, Maya stood on the balcony, staring at the glittering skyline. The city stretched endlessly below, but for once, its vastness didn't make her feel small. She heard Ethan step outside behind her, his presence familiar now. Can't sleep? He asked softly. She shook her head, arms folded. I keep thinking about the messages, the car, the way he keeps finding me. Ethan stepped closer, his voice quiet but firm. We'll stop him. Maya turned to face him, her throat tight. How can you be so sure? His blue eyes met hers without wavering. Because I'll do whatever it takes. The conviction in his tone sent a shiver down her spine, but not from fear. The following evening, everything changed. Maya was leaving the office with Nicole when they entered the parking garage. The space was dimly lit, their heels echoing across the concrete. Halfway to the car, Nicole froze her hand, tightening around Maya's arm. Maya, she whispered. Over there. A figure leaned against a pillar near the far exit. Jerome. Her pulse roared in her ears. Before she could react, Jerome pushed off the pillar, his voice low but sharp across the open space. You've been avoiding me. Maya's breath caught her body rooted in place. Nicole reached for her phone, but Jerome's eyes flicked to her, sharply stopping her cold. Don't, he warned. Suddenly, another voice cut through the tense silence. Please step away from her. Ethan. He emerged from behind a row of cars, flanked by 2 security guards, his expression cold, lethal in its focus. Jerome sneered. This isn't your business, Cole. It became my business, Ethan said evenly, the second you started stalking one of my employees. You're done here, Jerome. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then the guards stepped forward, positioning themselves between Maya and Jerome. Police are on their way, Ethan said calmly, his voice like steel. If you're smart, you'll leave now. Jerome's jaw flexed, his fists clenching, but something in Ethan's unwavering stance finally broke through his bravado. Without another word, Jerome turned and stormed out of the garage. Maya stood frozen, her knees trembling until Ethan stepped close, his voice soft now. You're safe, he said gently. I promise. And for the first time in weeks, she almost believed him.